October 1943. A lone mosquito drops through cloud at 400 miles per hour. No bombs, no escort, just cameras and a pilot who refuses to pull up. German flak opens fire. The dive steepens. His navigator braces. They are seconds from impact or breakthrough. What happens next will rewrite how wars photograph their enemies. The autumn sky over occupied Europe belongs to the Reich. Anti-aircraft batteries ring every factory, every rail yard, every fortified coast. By late 1943, reconnaissance flights are a calculated gamble. High altitude means safety, but haze. Low altitude means clarity, but death. The Allies need both. They are getting neither. Photographic intelligence drives everything: invasion plans, bombing priorities, naval movements. But German defenses have adapted. Fighters swarm anything slow, flak brackets anything predictable. Reconnaissance squadrons are bleeding crews faster than they can replace them. The photographs that do come back are often useless, too distant, too blurred, taken through smoke or cloud or the jitter of evasive maneuvers. At RAF Benson, analysts squint at grainy prints. They mark what they think might be gun emplacements. They guess at fortifications. The intelligence officers know the truth. Guesswork kills paratroopers. Guesswork sinks landing craft. The invasion of Europe is coming, and the Allies are flying half-blind into the most defended coastline on Earth. The de Havilland Mosquito offers a sliver of hope. Built of plywood and speed, it carries no defensive guns. It survives by outrunning trouble. Reconnaissance variants trade bombs for fuel and cameras. They fly alone, trusting altitude and velocity. But even mosquitoes cannot escape physics. A camera shutter needs stability. A useful photograph needs detail. And detail requires getting close. Squadron Leader Adrian Warburton already knows this. He has flown more reconnaissance missions than most crews survive. Malta, North Africa, the Mediterranean. He has photographed invasion beaches and enemy convoys and harbors thick with warships. His logbook is a catalogue of risks that should have killed him. Some call him reckless. Others call him essential. He calls himself curious. In the autumn of 1943, Warburton transfers to a Special Duties Unit. The assignment is vague. The targets are not. He will photograph what others cannot. He will go where doctrine says not to. And he will do it in a mosquito modified for one purpose: getting impossibly close and getting out alive. His first briefings reveal the scope of the problem. Existing reconnaissance photographs of German defenses are inadequate for invasion planning. The Atlantic Wall is a shadow in most images. Bunkers blend into cliffs. Gun positions hide under camouflage nets. Analysts need photographs sharp enough to count firing slits and measure concrete thickness. They need images taken from angles no high-altitude sortie can provide. Warburton studies the mission parameters. He reads the altitude recommendations. He notes the survival statistics. Then he sets them aside. There is a gap between what the manual prescribes and what the war demands. He has built a career in that gap. His navigator, a steady-handed officer named Frank Bastard, joins him in the mapping room. They review coastal targets along the French shore. The defenses are layered. Fighters patrol inland. Flak belts guard the coast. Approaching straight and level is suicide. Approaching high is pointless. Bastard traces a finger along the cliffs of Normandy. He asks what Warburton is thinking. Warburton tells him they will go lower than anyone expects. Lower than the guns can depress. Lower than doctrine allows. Bastard does not argue. He has flown with Warburton before. If stories like this matter to you, like and subscribe, so these missions aren't forgotten. Adrian Warburton was not born reckless. He was born restless. The son of a British colonial officer, he grew up between worlds: India, England, boarding schools that taught discipline but never quite contained him. He joined the Royal Air Force in 1939, not out of patriotic fervor, but because flying was the only thing that held his attention. Early in the war, he is assigned to photo reconnaissance. It is considered a backwater posting. No dogfights, no bomber streams, just cameras and long hours over empty sea. Most pilots find it tedious. Warburton finds it clarifying. Reconnaissance is a puzzle. Every mission asks the same question: how do you see what the enemy wants hidden? He begins to experiment. He flies lower than briefed. He approaches targets from unexpected angles. He lingers over objectives when others would turn for home. His photographs improve. They become sharper, more detailed, more useful. His superiors are unsure whether to commend or court-martial him. His results make the decision for them. In Malta, under siege and undersupplied, Warburton becomes legend. He flies multiple sorties a day in battered planes held together by improvisation. He photographs Italian convoys, German airfields, and invasion fleets massing in Sicily. His intelligence directs strikes that sink supply ships and strand Axis forces. He is awarded the Distinguished Service Order, then a bar to it, then another. He is mentioned in dispatches so often that his name becomes shorthand for a certain kind of pilot, one who treats the rule book as a suggestion. But recognition does not change him. He remains disheveled, informal, and privately tormented. He loses friends weekly. He watches planes vanish over the horizon and never return. The mathematics of survival are brutal. The more missions you fly, the closer the odds swing against you. Warburton has flown hundreds. He does not speak much about fear. He does not attend mess dinners or celebrate victories. He treats each mission as a problem set. Study the target, understand the defenses, find the gap, exploit it, survive, repeat. By 1943, he is one of the most experienced reconnaissance pilots in the RAF. His logbook is thick with sorties that should have ended in fire and wreckage. Instead, they ended in photographs that shaped campaigns. He has survived not through caution, but through an obsessive understanding of what aircraft and cameras and human reaction times can do when pushed to their edge. When the call comes for a new kind of mission, one that requires flying into the teeth of the Atlantic Wall defenses, Warburton does not hesitate. He knows the cost. He has attended too many funerals not to. But he also knows what happens when intelligence fails. Soldiers die on beaches because planners guessed wrong. Ships burn because defenses were underestimated. Entire operations collapse because someone did not get close enough to see the truth. He accepts the assignment. He studies the maps of Normandy and the Pas de Calais. He notes the cliff heights, the likely gun positions, the approach paths that might, just might, offer a sliver of surprise. He requests modifications to his Mosquito, more film capacity, reinforced camera mounts, and permission to fly the mission his way. Permission is a formality. Everyone knows he will fly it his way regardless. The problem is altitude. It has always been altitude. Reconnaissance doctrine is written in the blood of crews who flew too low and the failure of crews who flew too high. The sweet spot is supposed to be 18,000 feet, above light flak, below the worst of the fighters, and high enough that evasive maneuvers do not ruin the photographs. But 18,000 feet over the Atlantic Wall is a death sentence. The Germans know the altitude. They know the flight paths. They plot firing solutions before the aircraft even arrives. Intelligence officers at Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force study the problem with increasing frustration. Operation Overlord, the invasion of Nazi-occupied France, is scheduled for the following summer. Success depends on knowing exactly what waits on those beaches, every bunker, every gun, every obstacle below the waterline. Existing reconnaissance has provided an outline, but outlines do not save lives. Planners need detail measured in inches, not yards. Photographic interpreters lay out the latest images on light tables. The coastal fortifications are visible as dark smudges against pale cliffs. Analysts guess at their purpose. That shadow might be a machine gun nest. That blur could be a mortar pit, or it could be a barn, or debris. The photographs are taken from 17,000 feet through industrial haze and coastal mist. They are, in the cold language of intelligence work, insufficient. Engineers calculate what it would take to assault an unknown defense. The numbers are grim. Without precise targeting data, naval bombardment becomes guesswork. Without knowing gun positions, landing craft cannot choose safe approach lanes. Without understanding bunker thickness, demolition teams pack the wrong charges. Uncertainty compounds. Casualties multiply. The failures are not for lack of trying. Reconnaissance. Spitfires have made low-level runs along the coast. Some return with excellent photographs. Most do not return at all. The flak is simply too dense. German gunners have learned to track low-altitude intruders and pour fire into their flight path. Speed is no defense when the entire sky ahead is filled with steel. High-altitude runs fare little better. The Luftwaffe stations fighters near the coast specifically to intercept reconnaissance flights. Even the Mosquito, fast as it is, cannot outrun a well-positioned Fokker-Wulf at altitude, and if the fighters do not catch them, the weather does. Clouds obscure targets. Haze diffuses detail. Winter light slants low and creates shadows that hide more than they reveal. Bomber Command suggests saturation photography. Send dozens of aircraft over the coast and accept the losses. Fighter Command suggests armed sweeps to suppress flak, then send in the cameras. Both approaches will work, eventually, but at a cost measured in crews and time. The invasion cannot wait for attrition. It needs answers now. Warburton reads the intelligence summaries and sees the gap. The problem is not equipment. The Mosquito cameras are excellent. The problem is not courage. Crews are willing. The problem is assumption. Everyone assumes there is a minimum safe altitude. Everyone assumes that flying straight and level is necessary for clarity. Everyone assumes the defenses are too thick to penetrate. He has spent 4 years proving assumptions wrong. He proposes a different approach. Instead of flying high or fast or with escorts, he will fly alone at wave-top height until the last possible moment. Then he will climb, not to 18,000 feet, but to 2,000, just high enough to clear the cliffs, just long enough to trigger the cameras. Then he will dive back to the deck and vanish before the guns can track him. The briefing room is silent when he finishes. An intelligence officer points out that climbing into flak range is suicide. A gunnery officer notes that German radar will see him coming. A flight surgeon suggests that the G-forces of such a dive might incapacitate the crew or damage the cameras. Warburton listens. Then he tells them he will fly the mission tomorrow. The idea comes not from doctrine, but from observation. Warburton has spent years watching how German gunners react. Flak crews are trained to fire at predicted positions. They calculate altitude, speed, and heading, then fill that future point in space with explosions. It works because most pilots are predictable. They fly steady. They follow flight plans. They react to flak by climbing or turning, which only makes the gunner's job easier. But if you appear where no one expects, at an altitude that doctrine forbids, from an angle that makes no tactical sense, the gunners hesitate. Not long. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Just enough. Warburton sketches the flight path on a map. He will approach the Normandy coast at 50 feet below radar coverage until he is seconds from the cliffs. Then he will pull up hard, climb to 1,500 feet, and level out directly over the fortifications. The cameras will run. The gunners will react. And before their shells reach altitude, he will nose over into a dive steeper than any bomber, faster than any fighter, and scream back toward the wave tops. It is not a plan that works twice. It is not a plan that works if the weather is wrong, or the timing is off, or the guns happen to be pointed the right direction. It is a plan that depends on surprise, speed, and the slim hope that chaos favors the bold. His navigator, Frank Bastard, studies the sketch. He asks how steep the dive will be. Warburton estimates 60 degrees, maybe more. Bastard asks if the airframe can take it. Warburton says they will find out. Bastard nods. He does not ask again. They brief the mission to a senior intelligence officer who has the authority to stop it. The officer listens without interrupting. When Warburton finishes, the officer asks what the survival odds are. Warburton does not lie. He says the odds are poor, but the odds of getting usable intelligence any other way are worse. The officer approves the mission. He does so in writing, which is unusual. It is an acknowledgment that what Warburton is proposing exists outside normal operational parameters. It is also, perhaps, a way to ensure that if the mission succeeds, there is a record, and if it fails, there is accountability. The night before the flight, Warburton walks the airfield. The Mosquito sits in its dispersal bay, canopy gleaming under blackout-dimmed lights. Ground crew have loaded the cameras and checked the fuel. Everything is ready. Everything is also fragile. Plywood and glue and 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. It feels like threading a needle at 400 miles per hour. He does not sleep much. He never does before a difficult mission. Instead, he reviews the map, the weather forecast, the known flak positions. He runs through the maneuver in his mind. Timing will be everything. Too early on the climb, and the guns will track him. Too late, and he will hit the cliffs. The margin for error is seconds. Dawn comes cold and clear. The weather is better than expected. Visibility will be good, which helps the cameras but also helps the gunners. Warburton and Bastard walk to the aircraft in silence. There is no ceremony, no speech, just the pre-flight routine, methodical and familiar. They taxi out. The Merlins settle into a steady roar. The tower clears them for takeoff. Warburton advances the throttles, and the Mosquito accelerates down the runway, lifts, and climbs into the pale morning sky. They set course for France. The English Channel is gray and cold beneath them. Warburton descends to wave-top height, throttling back just enough to keep the airframe from shaking itself apart. At this altitude, the world compresses. The horizon vanishes. There is only water and speed and the vibration of engines pushed near their limit. Bastard calls out navigation checks. Distance to coast. Time to climb point. Fuel state. His voice is calm. It is always calm. Warburton adjusts heading by small increments, lining up on a specific stretch of cliff west of Arromanches. This is where the photographs are needed most. This is where the invasion planners believe the defenses are thickest. The French coast appears as a thin line, then a smudge of detail. Cliffs rise 200 feet above the water. Warburton holds altitude until the cliffs fill the windscreen. Then he pulls back on the yoke. Hard. The Mosquito claws upward. The airframe groans. The speed bleeds off rapidly as the nose comes up, trading velocity for altitude. 1,000 feet. 1,200. 1,500. The cliffs fall away beneath them, and then they are over the fortifications. The world erupts. Every gun within a mile opens fire. The Germans have been waiting. Perhaps they heard the engines. Perhaps radar picked them up during the climb. It does not matter. The sky fills with tracer and smoke and the black puff of high-explosive shells. Warburton does not flinch. He holds the Mosquito level for 5 seconds. The cameras are running. Each frame captures concrete bunkers, gun pits, trenches, and obstacles with a clarity no previous sortie has achieved. The altitude is perfect. The angle is perfect. The light is perfect. Then the shells begin to bracket them. A burst explodes off the right wing. Shrapnel punctures the plywood skin. Another burst detonates ahead, and the aircraft shudders through the pressure wave. Bastard calls out that they have the photographs. Warburton does not wait. He shoves the yoke forward. The Mosquito pitches into a dive. The descent is violent. 60 degrees becomes 70. The airspeed indicator winds up past the red line. The ocean rushes toward them at a speed that seems to defy survival. The engines scream. The controls stiffen as the airframe loads up with G-forces. Warning lights flicker. Something in the tail section rattles loose. Warburton fights the stick, easing out of the dive in a curve that presses them into their seats. The altimeter unwinds. 1,000 feet, 500, 200. He levels out at 50 feet, so low that the propellers churn salt spray. Behind them, the flak continues for a few seconds, then stops. The gunners have lost them. They are over open water again. The cliffs recede. Bastard checks the cameras. The film is intact. The mounts held. They have what they came for. Warburton sets course for England and does not speak. His hands are steady on the controls, but his breathing is shallow. The adrenaline will fade soon, replaced by exhaustion and the shakes that always come after. They land at Benson 50 minutes later. Ground crew swarm the aircraft, pointing at the shrapnel holes and the dented tail. Warburton shuts down the engines and sits for a moment in the sudden silence. Then he climbs out, lights a cigarette, and walks to the intelligence section. He does not wait for the film to be developed. He knows it will be good. He has done this enough times to know when a mission works. The photographs will show everything the planners need: bunkers, gun positions, obstacles, all of it sharp and clear and undeniable. An intelligence officer meets him at the door. The officer asks how it went. Warburton shrugs and says they got the pictures. The officer asks if it was dangerous. Warburton says it was a reconnaissance flight. They are all dangerous. By evening, the photographs are on desks in London. Analysts see details that have eluded them for months. Engineers begin calculating demolition charges. Naval gunners plot firing solutions. The invasion planning, stalled by uncertainty, lurches forward. No one calls it a suicidal dive. They call it a success. The photographs from Warburton's mission circulate quickly. Within days, copies reach Eisenhower's headquarters. Within weeks, they inform the final revisions to the Overlord plan. The bunkers Warburton photographed are targeted for naval bombardment. The gun positions are marked for suppression by fighter bombers. The obstacles are catalogued for demolition teams to clear on D-Day. Other reconnaissance crews study Warburton's approach. Some attempt similar low-altitude runs, followed by brief climbs. A few succeed, others are shot down. The tactic works only in specific conditions: surprise, speed, and a pilot willing to accept that success and survival are separate outcomes. But the intelligence keeps coming. Warburton flies more missions along the coast. Each one refines the technique. He varies the approach angle. He times the climbs to coincide with moments when German radar is masked by terrain. He learns which stretches of coast are most heavily defended and which offer brief gaps in coverage. His photographs fill in the map, piece by piece, frame by frame. By early 1944, Allied planners have a detailed photographic record of the Atlantic Wall. They know where the guns are. They know the thickness of the concrete. They know the fields of fire and the blind spots. The intelligence is not perfect, but it is good enough to plan, good enough to act. The impact is measurable. On D-Day, naval bombardment targets bunkers with precision. Demolition teams know exactly which obstacles to prioritize. Infantry units land with maps that show the location of every strong point within 100 yards of the beach. Casualties are still horrific, but they are not as catastrophic as they might have been. Thousands of men survive because someone flew low enough to see the truth. Warburton does not fly on D-Day. By then, he has been transferred again, this time to a unit preparing for operations in southern Europe. He does not witness the invasion he helped make possible. He does not see the beaches or the smoke or the men wading through surf toward the fortifications he photographed. In April 1944, 2 months before Overlord, Warburton takes off on a reconnaissance mission over Germany. His aircraft does not return. No wreckage is found. No distress signal is received. He simply vanishes, another name added to the long list of crews lost over occupied Europe. For decades, his fate remains unknown. In 2002, a researcher investigating Luftwaffe records finds a report of a mosquito shot down near Munich on the date Warburton disappeared. Wreckage is located. Personal effects confirm the identification. He is buried with honors, 60 years after his final flight. But his photographs remain. They are filed in archives, labeled with grid coordinates and dates. Historians studying the invasion use them to understand how the Allies planned the assault. Analysts comparing pre-invasion intelligence to post-invasion reality note the accuracy of the coastal images. The annotations in the margins are clinical: altitude, lens type, exposure time. They do not mention the dive. They do not mention the flak. They do not mention the seconds between the climb and the survival. Wars are built on information: movements of divisions, locations of airfields, thickness of walls. The side that sees more clearly fights with an advantage measured in lives saved and objectives secured. Reconnaissance is the quiet calculus beneath every battle plan. It is also the most dangerous work in the sky. Adrian Warburton understood that clarity comes at a cost. Every mission he flew was a negotiation between what the mission required and what the aircraft could survive. He pushed both to their limits, not out of recklessness, but out of a stubborn belief that if something needed to be known, it was worth the risk to know it. His innovation was not technological. He did not invent a new camera or a faster plane. His innovation was tactical and psychological. He recognized that German defenses were designed to counter predictable behavior. So he became unpredictable. He flew altitudes no doctrine recommended. He approached from angles that made no sense. He stayed over targets longer than anyone thought survivable, and he did it so many times that the impossible became routine. The dive over Normandy was not the first time he risked everything for a photograph. It was simply the most consequential. The intelligence gathered that day, and on the missions that followed, gave Allied planners the confidence to commit to Overlord. They knew what waited on those beaches. They knew it because Warburton flew low enough to see it. There is a photograph in the Imperial War Museum archives. It shows a mosquito in flight, low over water, engines streaming vapor trails in the cold air. The caption notes the date and the pilot. It does not note that this particular sortie involved a climb into flak so dense that survival seemed statistically impossible. It does not note the dive that followed. It simply records that the mission was successful and the photographs were used in planning. That is how most heroism is recorded: in dry language, in archived images, In footnotes that do not capture the terror or the adrenaline or the moment when a pilot decides that the mission matters more than the odds. Warburton was awarded the Distinguished Service Order 3 times, the Distinguished Flying Cross twice, and mentioned in dispatches repeatedly. He was one of the most decorated reconnaissance pilots of the war. But the medals do not explain him. They mark moments of success, but not the habit of mind that made those moments possible. He was curious, he was defiant, and he believed that knowing the truth, even at great cost, was better than guessing. After the war, pilots who flew with him were asked what made him different. Most struggled to answer. He was not louder or bolder or more aggressive than other pilots. He was quieter, actually, more thoughtful. He studied maps the way others studied chess problems. He treated each mission as a puzzle with a solution that no one had found yet. One navigator said that flying with Warburton felt like being inside someone else's logic. You did not always understand the decision until it was over. But it always made sense afterward. The dive made sense. The altitude made sense. The timing made sense. It only seemed suicidal if you did not understand what he was trying to achieve. The legacy of that dive is woven into the planning documents of Overlord. Analysts used Warburton's photographs to map the Atlantic Wall with a precision that shaped the entire invasion. Engineers used them to design obstacles. Commanders used them to assign targets. Soldiers used them to navigate terrain they had never seen. The photographs taken in those 5 seconds over the Norman coast changed the outcome of the war in ways that are difficult to quantify but impossible to dismiss. Warburton did not live to see the invasion succeed. He did not see the collapse of the Atlantic Wall or the liberation of France or the end of the war he fought so long to win. He disappeared into the sky over Germany, one more pilot who flew too many missions and ran out of luck. But the dive remains. It remains in the archives. It remains in the memories of the crews who studied his methods and tried to replicate his results. It remains in the way reconnaissance doctrine was quietly revised after the war to acknowledge that sometimes the only way to see the truth is to fly closer than anyone thinks possible. One pilot's decision to climb into the flak, hold steady for 5 seconds, and then dive toward the sea. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a speech or a charge or a dramatic sacrifice. It was simply a recognition that the mission required something no one else was willing to do. And so he did it. That is the shape of hidden genius. Not louder or more visible, but quieter and more precise. A choice made in seconds that echoes for decades. A dive that looked like suicide but was actually clarity. A photograph that changed everything because someone refused to guess when they could know. The war is full of such moments. Most are never recorded. Some are forgotten. A few, like Warburton's dive, are preserved in the margins of history, silent, essential, and undeniable.